The transfer window's open, and that means Todd Bowley is throwing money out the window. So we're used to seeing this. But will we, in this transfer window, see any of this? Let's find out, because today we're talking to the man himself on the Gooners Pod.
Once upon a time, way back when there were only 9,000 Arsenal podcasts, 6 young men from various backgrounds. A young basketball prodigy with more trophies in the last 20 years than Tottenham Hotspur. An Irish kid with a horrible haircut. A young Jewish nerd who hadn't discovered food yet. A child from Hemel Hempstead who didn't want to be English no more. A handsome young man who learned to play football on the hard streets of Disney World. And a young Mexican AC Milan fan. Hatched a plan to take over the world of Arsenal podcasts. But then these boys became men. Jared. Ewan. Magic. Aston. Andy. And Miguel. And the rest, my friends, is history. And now, all these years later, you tune in every so often to hear their incredible takes, their football knowledge, and their sensual advice. But now, it's gone too far. You, our fans, are at long last witness to season
7.
Welcome to the Gooners Pod.
Hello, and welcome to the Gooners Podcast, Season 7, Episode 70, a very special episode where we welcome in one of our all-time favorite guests, the one, the only, Charles Watts from Gold.com. How you been, Charlie?
I'm good, Charlie? Mate. You can call me what you want, Mike.
I call you Sea Dog.
Sea-Dog. You can call me what you want. You would be the first person to ever call me Sea Dog if you did, but by all means.
You're going to be so mad when that sticks. Like everywhere, you're going to be like, yo, Sea Dog, the Arsenal correspondent.
Yeah, I'm sure that will be great for his career, and he will appreciate me forever. No, seriously, how you been, mate? It's been a while. I think last time we saw each other was maybe August or even May before that, in the usual place.
It was the Tollington front garden, I think, wasn't it? Before the last game of the season? I think it was.
Yeah, I think my daughter was over. I introduced her because she's just today got her first postgraduate job in journalism.
Congratulations.
She'll be in Phoenix, Arizona for 10 weeks over the summer. I think it's maybe 55 degrees, and that's Celsius in there that summer, but pretty good for political journalism. But again, this is not the Alley cast. This is the Charles Watts cast. So, but I will mention one more thing that has to do with my kids, and that is my son Jake has a bone to pick with you. And I don't think you've met him. I know you met my daughter, but here in the States, most of the Arsenal games are. Oh, okay. Well, have you met my mom yet? We'll save that for later. Most of the games in the States are shown either on like the NBC network channels or Peacock, which is the paywalled NBC channel. Mm-hmm. And I'm guessing we're anywhere from 2 or 3 seconds to maybe 30 seconds delayed from what's actually happening on the pitch. And there have been about, I know you know where this is going. There's been about 8 or 9 times over the past year or two where the two of us have been watching a game and I just go vaulting like a rocket out of my seat, screaming, usually happily, sometimes unhappily. And he just gets pissed off at this point because you apparently you're like in the matrix. Like you know about the goals and have already typed out a tweet before they even happen. I'm convinced. So and I should be the one showing a little bit of restraint and self-control, but I can't do that. So he's very angry at you. How do you get those tweets out?
Yeah, the joys of the delay. I get that all the time, especially in Europa League nights when we got everyone's watching it over here on the BT Sport app, and it's about half a minute behind.
I mean, it's not even the delay though. you have them ready. You must have like a soundboard, like some radio stations. They have all like 20 different sounds. And all they got to do is just press the button. Do you have everyone scoring every goal of every possible kind, and you just hit send as soon as it happens?
I don't have anything. I just literally type the name out in big letters and in celebratory style, and that's it. I'll start. Actually, just mute me for the match.
Well, I've started to go on Do Not Disturb, which I mean, just because I mean, look, I'm not gonna. It's your job. It's you're there. I know someone that went to a sporting event and she was listening to it and was worried that she was going to have the event spoiled for her. Like she thought that what she was watching at the stadium was on delay, and that's a whole different conversation. But
I know how annoying that can be, though.
Congratulations on getting them out quick, I guess is the key to that.
That's funny, but
when I'm watching a game.
You can't, Mike. You can't just because Charles is on doesn't mean Sea-Dog is willing to reveal all of his tips and tricks. Okay, he's got the fastest Twitter thumbs in London, so like let him be. Let him be. A magician never reveals how it's done.
That's true. I promised Jake I would find out exactly how it's done, and I just don't think we're going to find it out. But we want to. I think we're about 6 minutes in, and Charles has been allowed to talk for 5 seconds, and that's on me. And we're going to stop that now. We have a lot of questions from the chat. We definitely want to get to as many of them as we can. Just do us a favor, and none of that, Mike, hers, and none of no Mudryk news. We're going to get to Mudryk news. We're going to get to Felix news, but we obviously got to start off with the Ukrainian and what the latest is going on there. I'm not super worried about it, but should I be?
Depends what you mean. Super worried about what? If he's going to come or not?
Yeah, I mean the Chelsea thing, the whether Mudryk's actually going to be forced to stay in Ukraine for another 6 months until the summer. I mean, what is the latest, as we've seen a number of different intentional press releases over the last couple of days?
Yeah. Well, as far as I know with it is, Arsenal have bid twice, both been rejected. Shakhtar are not budging at the moment on their valuation, which is 100 million euros, 88 million pounds. That's what they want. And if they don't get it, then my understanding of the situation is that they're more than willing just to stop the talks, postpone it until the summer, and then revisit them. Whether that's a sort of bluff at this stage of the window, and that a stance will soften as you get later on into January, especially given how much Mudryk clearly wants the move. It might be a bit of a double bluff. I think the Chelsea thing's not going to help Arsenal. And today, I mean, we're in the second half of the game against Manchester City at the moment. They've lost Pulisic and Sterling to injury in the first half, both gone off. The way Todd Bowley operates, he's probably chucking £200 million at Shakhtar as we speak, and a 15-year contract for Mudryk. So that's going to complicate the issue a little bit. But I mean, I can't see Arsenal going to 88 million, and that's 88 million with add-ons. It's not just a straight fee of 88. That's what they're looking for. They're still very much pointing to Anthony, to Grealish as the fee, but I can't see Arsenal doing that. I think there's going to come to a point this month that there has to come to a point when Arsenal would say, okay, it's not happening, we're going to walk away, we're going to move on to other targets, because they clearly need to bring in someone else. And if it's not going to be Mudryk, at some point this month, they're going to have to move on to someone else.
Now, granted, I think that our last offer was like 42 million plus add-ons, if I'm not mistaken. I think the biggest part of that deal structured is that they want a lot of it up front, correct? Mm-hmm. I know that we're all worried about Chelsea, but wasn't Chelsea with the Enzo Fernandez deal exactly not able to land him because they weren't willing to put the money up front? And is that something that should go into the consideration on whether this transfer will happen or not, whether or not Arsenal are willing to front load those costs like Shakhtar want?
Potentially, but I mean, the Enzo Fernandez, I mean, that was huge money up front they wanted, because it's a release clause, about 120 million up front or something. And this is not going to be that. It would be, I imagine, you're probably looking at 50, 60 up front, and then the rest of it structured over the next few years. So, I mean, it might come into it, but I still feel that, although at the moment it's not looking great, I'm not in a panic. I wouldn't panic about it just yet. It's only January the 5th. There's a long time to go this month, and Arsenal absolutely want to strengthen, and Mudryk's a priority. So and talks haven't been cut off yet. They're still very much talking. I mean, the Shakhtar sporting director's in London at the moment, and talks are going to continue. So it's just a case of if they can get a structure of this deal right or not. I think the fact that Mudryk is so keen to join Arsenal, it has to play into their hands. It has to be a good selling point for Arsenal that the player is that keen to make the move.
Certainly, and we've seen player power really increase over the last 5 or 10 years. I mean, it is very rare that you see a player agitate for a move, whether more so than this, which I think would be hard to imagine, or even more subtly than this, and not end up with that move. And whether it's I guess the last case of that happening was Peter Odemwingie, but yeah, I mean, you just don't see these things not end up happening. And I'm wondering, and along with Matt Lacasa's question, has Arsenal played any other hands in this game of poker? Are other than maybe the João Felix thing, are there any other realistic targets out there where the club and or the supporters can look at it and say, you know what, if we don't get Mudryk, then it's another disciplined move, like not pushing out the wheelbarrow for Isaac last year, and we'll get somebody just as good or better behind them. I mean, I guess that's two questions. Is there a backup? And what amount of player power do you think really exists here with Mudryk to force this move now or this summer and repel the Chelsea advances in their money?
I mean, I'm sure there is a backup. I don't know who it is at this point, but I'm sure that there has to be. The way that the clubs operate, they'll have number 1, number 2, number 3. They'll have them all written down in Edu's wall. But it's just a case of at what point do you move on to those other targets? We're not at that point yet, and I don't expect to be at that point like immediately. I think this has the potential to rumble on for quite a bit longer yet. It's a big dilemma for Arsenal, though. I mean, you're talking about committing to an £88 million package, even if that is structured over a few years for a player. He's played like 23 senior appearances in the league, and never outside of Ukraine. He's only got 8 international appearances. It's £88 million for someone who's played 23 league games. It's huge. I mean, someone said there, Leao, I saw pop up, but I'm not sure that's realistic either, because I probably imagine that Leao would be more expensive than Mudryk, to be honest. I can't imagine AC Milan letting him go for less than sort of around the 90 million, 100 million mark as well. So the thing with Arsenal is they're very clever in the transfer market now. They've got a clear plan, which is great, because it's been too long that they didn't have that plan. They have it now, and they're not going to move away from it. So I don't think they're going to panic. We saw it at this stage last season in January when they didn't panic, when they didn't bring in a replacement for Aubameyang because they couldn't find a player that they wanted, and they were willing to wait for Jesus in the summer. And I don't think they'll panic this summer, this month either, when it comes to Mudryk.
I actually have a specific question about that, because when we're looking at players, like say you're looking at strikers, for example. Some strikers are traditional number 9s, some play all over the pitch. Different people have different skill sets, and I think that exists also with the Arsenal transfer team, right? And one of the things that I would note is, whereas I think Arsenal are incredibly good at identifying talent and sticking to their guns, we have noticed over the last few years a couple of times when Arsenal maybe don't necessarily get the deal done, or maybe they take a little longer. Like we're talking about the Douglas Luiz situation at the tail end of last year. We had Vlahovic. There have been several times. Tielemans is another example. There have been several times. Yeah, there's several times where it looks like maybe even though we may have our targets identified, maybe we don't move on to that plan B soon enough so that we can get them in and at a reasonable time. Are you worried at all about that maybe happening, that we won't move to plan B fast enough so that we can get, because I think that what's most important right now, right, is that we have Saka, Martinelli, and Eddie Nketiah, and that's it. Reece Nelson is injured. Hopefully ESR will be back for the Oxford game, and we don't know when Jesus is going to be back. So we actually are incredibly light. So I think that, especially considering that some players going to have to bet in, right? We need to get a player in as quickly as possible. So do you worry that maybe we'll spend too much time on the Mudryk deal if Shakhtar aren't willing to move off that valuation?
To be honest, I'd be more worried if they just went out and thought, we're not going to get Mudryk, we're just going to sign someone for the sake of it, because I'm kind of fed up with Arsenal doing that. and they're not doing it now, and I like that. And Mikel's made it really clear in like a couple of press conferences ago when he said we don't just need a body, we need someone who's going to make us better. And I think that's what Arsenal is. That's the way they're working now. And you talked about some of those previous players like Rafinha. They went for him, but it was clear, obviously, it's kind of like Mudryk now. He wanted Barcelona. That was the only place he was going to go. If Barcelona fronted up the money, they were going to get him. Tielemans they've never bid for. He's always been in. They've been interested in, but they've never once actually made a bid for Tielemans, as far as I'm aware. And
Douglas Luiz,
they bid for, but again, they didn't panic when Aston Villa said no. They went, well, we're not going to sign him then, and which was quite right, because within a couple of months, Partey was back and playing. Douglas Luiz wouldn't be playing for Arsenal now, and you'd have given someone a 5-year contract and spent. Villa wanted huge amounts of money for him, and it just wouldn't have been worth it. And that's money that would be taken out of the transfer pot for players who are worth it. And Arsenal can't go out and just spend as much money as they want on anyone, because they've not got that sort of owner. They've not got that ownership model. So they've got to pick and choose when they spend big money. They've got to make sure now that they get it right. Because if they get it wrong, if you have another Nicolas Pepe situation, for example, then you're screwed really for Arsenal, because you've taken all that money out of the budget, and you haven't really improved the squad or improved the options that Arteta's got. So I think I'd be more worried if they just went out and signed anyone for the sake of it right at the end of the window because they didn't get Mudryk. I'd rather them spend a bit more time right now trying to get this deal done, trying to get it structured the right way before moving on.
And I think that we've learned that, part of this entire plan and part of what's given us the flexibility to have the big summer that we did, and bringing in 5 players, I believe, and pretty much doing the same the previous summer, was our contract discipline, our newfound contract discipline, both on, terminating existing contracts that were killing us and not getting sucked back into new ones that were going to do the same thing all over again. I think for that reason, many people last January were willing to accept the fact that we didn't panic buy. I don't know that as many people would. No one wants to panic buy, but I think the sentiment this season is we are in with an even better chance now for something even more special than top 4. Let's not blow our opportunity by finding ourselves thin again. It's not about our first team. It's about our second team and our depth. And, I guess if we end up in January without a signing, I almost said a big signing, but what I'm specifically saying is without additional depth that is better than the depth we currently have now, I think it would be more an identification, not that we didn't sign the right players, but that we didn't have enough players in the pipeline working on those deals all throughout January to get a deal done with somebody that was on our preferred list. Whether it's
I agree. I do agree, and I think it was very apparent in that Newcastle game when you looked to the bench that there was no one there who could really change it. You didn't bring on Vieira, and I'm not surprised, to be honest, which maybe is a bit of a slant on Vieira, but it was such a physical game, and I didn't look at that and think Vieira is going to come on and make a difference in the second half. I just didn't see it, and he's still bedding in, he's still adjusting. I think he's a talented player, but I don't think that was the game for him the way it was playing out. So
bringing in a guy who weighs less than 10 stone and isn't known for his hardness, I guess, is
with the rotational fouling.
I don't think he would have changed that game, but it was clear there was no one. You sort of. Obviously, you've got your striker who you would normally bring on if you need a goal to help try and get a goal. You've got him already starting because Jesus is injured. Obviously, you've got no Smith Rowe who'd come on. If you'd looked on that bench and you had Nketiah and Smith Rowe on the bench and you had Jesus starting, then there would have been more options. So they clearly do need a stronger squad. There's no doubt about it, and it was pretty apparent in that Newcastle game.
One last quick comment about Mudryk, and then we'll move on to other names and other topics. Again, the actual amount of the transfer, if it's 88 million pounds, if it's 66 million pounds, if it's structured this way or that way, you've got camps of people who are like, I don't care, it's not my money, I don't care. I hope the club just spends whatever they need to get the player. And while I don't subscribe to that, what I do subscribe to is if Edu and Arteta feel that the player is worth that much money, they've earned my blind trust almost for the time being. They've earned my ability to say, you know what, they must see something in him that really convinces us that this would be a missed opportunity if we don't do it. So I wouldn't be disappointed if we spend 85 million, but I don't think the player is worth 85 million. So are Arteta and Edu driving this with, look, we'll get it done if you really, really want him? Or is there an edict that's basically saying, we'll buy him if he's 65. We're not going to buy him if he's 75.
I mean, I'm sure Arteta would have him whatever he costs. I don't think Arteta wouldn't care about the money. It'll be those above him will be looking at the sort of value that they would potentially go to. So I'm just looking. Man City have just scored.
Chelsea. We all saw.
Yeah.
Was it Grealish, the 115 million euro player? Because that doesn't help.
No, I think it was Mahrez, wasn't it?
Mahrez. Okay. Yeah, it was Mahrez. So yeah, I mean, Arteta will be pressing for it. I mean, every single press conference he's in, it's hilarious. He doesn't mince his words. He's calling for more additions every single press conference he is. So he's in. But the club will clearly have a value. Look, I mean, I'm with you. If they agree to spend 88 million on him, then fine with me. And I really, really want Mudryk because I think he's a fantastic player. Followed him for the last few years. I saw him for the first time when he must have just come into the team as like a 19-year-old. I flicked on Champions League in Shakhtar were playing at the Bernabeu, and I tweeted it at the time. I was like, "Who is this?" I saw this blonde-haired kid running down. He just looked brilliant straight away, and I just searched like
it's a Ukrainian Kaya Kainak, basically.
Yeah. I had to say Shakhtar number 62, and obviously I saw it as Mudryk. I was like, "Who is this Mudryk? He looks brilliant." It's just straight away your eyes are drawn to him because of his low centre of gravity, the pace he runs at the ball. So exciting, and I'm not surprised Arsenal are desperate to sign him. He looks like he could come in and make a huge difference. Whether he would necessarily be the type of player to come in January and help them win the title, I'm not so sure. I mean, I was thinking about it today, and this was, if you've got a choice now in January to help you get over the line to win the title, at this point, Mudryk or Zaha, who helps you win the title more if they come in now?
I agree with you that it's probably Zaha, but I just have this thing about Zaha where I want.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying don't sign him. I'm not saying sign him, but
right. No, well, he's got Premier League experience, and he just basically picks up where he left off with better players around him in a title chase. Exactly. I mean, I agree with you. I still don't think Zaha gets in ahead of Saka or Martinelli, but we've got 2 games a week coming up, and he definitely helps us get deep in the Europa League.
But I don't think Mudryk gets in ahead of Saka or Martinelli either.
No, I don't either. I think we have enough games that they can help each other preserve their legs for what is ultimately going to be 180 minutes a week for a large portion of the next 4 months. So,
which is actually ironic because a little bit of the talk around Mudryk and going to Chelsea, one of the arguments being presented is, will he actually get more game time at Chelsea than at Arsenal? And that's for the first time in a very long time, that's a very interesting question because he might just, with Pulisic going down, Sterling going down in the game today, he may be starting for Chelsea next week. Versus here, he may, it may take him a couple of weeks to get his starting point. But I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask you something about our transfer strategy in general and stuff like this, right? We have seen a lot of obviously Mudryk on Mudryk's side saying, liking that image or, showing that he's watching Arsenal games. And I know that obviously affects it, but what's actually strange is, like you say, Arteta actually doesn't talk about Mudryk directly. He says that we need transfers in. Now, is that a little bit of a misstep? Should Arsenal do more to try to unsettle the situation, like via like a Barcelona or like a Chelsea who might say, they're really holding him? Should we be playing that angle more, or no? Should we continue to do the way that we're doing? And personally, I think it's a little bit of a classier way to move. I think it also it holds our cards a little closer to our chest. But what do you think about?
Should we be sending Stan Kroenke over there with an Arsenal jersey to just force over the top of his head?
Yeah, talk about how we're business class or something.
No, absolutely not. I can't. I like the way Arsenal operate. I mean, you look at what Chelsea have done with Fernandes now, and you see the Benfica manager calling him out today. You don't want that happening if you're Arsenal. You don't want a manager sitting there and slagging you off to the worldwide media for 6 minutes, do you? It's just embarrassing, really. So no, I'm quite happy with the way Arsenal operate. Arsenal's a club that's born out of class. It has done for 100 odd years. So no, I don't want to see them changing. And I know we always have to ask Arteta questions in a press conference. We know what he's going to say beforehand, but you always still have to try and get something out of him. He never plays ball. Some managers do, some managers don't. This is clearly his stance, but I'm perfectly happy with the way Arsenal operate publicly when it comes to transfers.
My final question on Mudryk part 2 is you talk about character, we talk about class the Arsenal way. I know a lot of people who are big fans of Arsenal and not big fans of how Mudryk is acting right now, even though it is to the presumed benefit of Arsenal. Given that Mikel Arteta is such a character guy, is there any, I mean, is he looking the other way on this and saying this is making our lives easier, or is he like basically looking at this as a potential future, occupation hazard, that this guy has this level of immaturity, if you want to call it that?
I think he's probably looking the other way because he wants him.
Yeah, I mean that's what I'm hoping, but the question has to be asked because he's got non-negotiables, and I would imagine if anyone was in the Arsenal squad making eyes like that and liking photos and posting memes about Real Madrid, that wouldn't sit so well with Arteta. But
I think the thing with Mudryk is he very nearly got his move to the Premier League last summer, and he thought he was going to get his move, and again Shakhtar blocked it at the kind of last minute, really, and I think there was probably some sort of agreement there that, okay, maybe just wait, stick it out a bit, help us in the Champions League group stages and go, and we'll have a look in January. And now suddenly, he's had this huge price tag put on his head that's prevented him getting a bit of a dream move. So I'm not surprised he's a bit annoyed about the situation. Probably what he shouldn't be doing, what he's doing, probably is not ideal. And I'm sure Shakhtar must have been fuming with the jail one because that's pushing it a little.
It's like when if you have a son who's like a teenager or something, like when they do something that they really shouldn't be doing, and you're supposed to be angry at them, but you're kind of like, you just laugh at it because it's funny, and that's how I look at this Mudryk situation. I mean, I know what he's doing is unprofessional, but because it makes me happy that he wants to come to Arsenal, I'm willing to overlook it. I'm not a perfect man. I don't think any of us are.
Speaking of things that are making us laugh, have you guys checked this out? Aubameyang was actually subbed on in the 5th minute, and he's now been subbed off for Amari Hutchinson in the 65th minute. What world are we living in right now?
One where Auba sucks.
I wasn't when he came on. I was hoping he was going to do something and do us a bit of a favour, but not to be. Maybe Amari Hutchinson will.
Yeah. Well, we do have other targets to talk about, right? Mike, you wanted to get in?
The last 20 or so minutes of the show, we're going to talk about a couple targets. We want to get to some of your user questions. We got some of those before the show. We've identified a few so far. If you have any questions for Charles, please put them in the chat with a Q, and we'll try to whip through those over the next 20 minutes or so and be out in time for the big 10 o'clock show with the FA Cup of football phrases, which you won't want to miss. So shoot, Aston.
Yeah, well, obviously, this is the big one, right? Atletico Madrid are asking for what looks like a $21 million loan deal package with a $16 million loan fee with $5 million covering the wages. Apparently, United have been offered up to, I think, 3.5 million. Obviously, you're the journalist. You probably have the inside scoop more on that. Is this a deal when you were talking about just moments ago, talking about the title challenge? Is Felix actually one of those short-term options that you would take maybe over Zaha for that title challenge, even though you're not going to own him at the end of the season? Is that something that is even worth looking at? Is the opportunity cost of winning the league worth it in this situation?
If he comes in and does the business, yeah, but I'm not convinced he would. I've not seen much from Felix. I think he had a good World Cup, and he's a decent player, but I'm not sure he's someone who comes in the middle of the Premier League season, having never played in the Premier League before, and wins Arsenal the title. Again, I still think that Zaha would make more of an impact for this season than getting him on loan. But the Felix one's weird. He's been offered around to everyone. This isn't just a case of Arsenal being interested in him. And I'm not even sure potentially how strong Arsenal's interest is. He's just someone who's there. He's available. He could be a short-term fix because of what Atletico are willing to let happen this month. But his agent's just doing around trying to get him a move at this stage. He'll be talking to everyone. It won't just be Arsenal. It won't just be United. It'll be Chelsea. It'll be other PSG. It will be clubs across Europe just to try to get him out of Atletico because of the breakdown in relationship really he's had with Simeone. So I don't think it's a case of, he is absolutely Arsenal's number one target behind Mudryk. It's just he's a player who potentially is available, who the agent is floating around to various clubs to see if he can get a taker at the moment. Again, I wonder if that fee that potentially Atletico are looking for could potentially come down later on in the window that we get, because it feels like a lot. I mean, 20 million for a player for 6 months who has never played in the Premier League before, it just feels like a lot. And you're not, there's no purchase clause at the end of that. I don't know. It feels like a lot of money to me on that one, and so I'm not convinced by.
I mean,
Felix.
I'm not comparing the players, but we turned down the opportunity to get, or we were trying to get Douglas Luiz for what, 25, 30 on a permanent deal. And we're going to go spend 20 that we'll never see back on. I mean, look, I don't buy the whole, but if you spend it and we win the league, then it was well worth it, because you're just forgetting about the part that if you spend it and we don't win the league, or we clearly don't win or lose as a result of him. I mean, we didn't lose the league because we got rid of Aubameyang last year, because Nketiah did anything, if anything, better than Aubameyang was doing. We did it because we had issues and depth problems at the back, not really with our attack. And I just, if it gets you the league type of scenarios, spend whatever money you have to. It isn't about the financial return, because winning the league versus finishing second nets you like £3 million. It isn't really about that. I just don't buy that. You have to look at the next 4, 5, 6 years as opposed to just the next 6 months when we're buying players. We just don't want to get caught in a situation where we're starting, we're recalling Fuller and Balogun. I mean, is that even a possibility?
I think that's off, right? We can't actually recall him in the middle of the season. I think that's probably better for his development, seeing as that the way that he's blowing up over there. The one thing I'll say about Felix, though, is that he actually statistically profiles almost identically to Jesus. So there is a question of whether he'd be a little plug and play. But the more interesting part about this is it feels like pre-COVID, we had this huge inflation and spike in the market where we were just paying insane money, especially in England, for different players. And it kind of came down during the COVID period because there were financial restrictions, obviously the loss of revenue and all of those things. But it feels like with this Felix deal and with this Mudryk deal that we're right back at that like super hyped, all these players are coming being valued at these astronomical fees. Like, is this just going to be the way of the world now, or are these just two outliers?
I think it's the kind of the way of the world. Certainly if you're a Premier League club, it's the way of the world, because if you're a Premier League club and you go sniffing around someone's player, your price doubles pretty much. And when you got Chelsea paying the sort of money that they've been paying for players, and Man United going out and signing Anthony, who was massively overpriced. Let's face it, we all knew it. Everyone knew it. Everyone knew it. That's not a dig at him. I think he's a good player, but he's never worth the money that they paid for him. And those sort of deals don't.
I've not heard of him before that transfer was completed. Like, I literally had no idea who that guy was, and then they.
Ajax will be laughing at, and Shakhtar will be hoping Arsenal do what Man United did, because they kept rejecting, and then right at the end, United are like, "Sod it, we'll give you what you want." And that's what Shakhtar are we hoping for. And fair play to them; they're the selling club. They can value them at whatever they want. So I do think if you're a big Premier League team, you've got to expect that if you go sniffing around someone else's player, then it's going to cost an awful lot of money. And I think especially if you're buying Premier League to Premier League, which seems to start happening a lot more recently. Clubs now, even in the mid-table of Premier, they don't need to sell. They've got so much money. They don't need to sell. They've got so much money coming in from all the TV deals. They're not under any pressure like they used to be. When a big team came knocking, it was kind of like, it's like Southampton, Liverpool going and raiding Southampton time after time, like it did all those years ago. It's just not going to be the case now. Or certainly the clubs aren't just going to let it happen cheaply. They'll say, oh, fine, you want our player, you give us 50 million, 60 million, quite unrealistic price tag. So I do think it's just the way of the world if you're a Premier League club now.
Does that mean that somebody at PSV Eindhoven needs to be sacked like immediately? Like, how did they?
Yeah,
I think the price is reasonable for in a vacuum, but in the market we're in, I mean, they wait 3 more weeks, and I bet you they get an extra £30 million for him.
There must have been some sort of agreement in place beforehand, I'm sure. I mean, it's a fantastic deal for Liverpool, especially on the back of a World Cup. I mean, you see players have World Cups like Gakpo had, and their value is just to get them for what they did. I mean, it's still a lot of money.
His contract, so it's not one of those type of deals. I mean,
it's still a lot of money for a relatively untested player on the world stage, but it is a very good deal from Liverpool, and I'm sure there must have been some sort of agreement. I mean, if you're Arsenal, and you're talking to Shakhtar, you point at that deal all day long, don't you?
Like,
You say, well, look what he's done on the international stage. He's played in, albeit Holland's not the best league, but it's still a stronger league than potentially the Ukrainian league, and they're getting him for 40 million. So what are you asking for double that for Mudryk? So you would be pointing at that, but again, I mean, a player's worth what the selling club wants at the end of the day, or what the buying club deems that they're going to spend. And it's you can argue about price tags all you want, can't you? But at the end of the day, it's just the market, and it's what the selling club will demand and what the buying club will put up.
Yeah.
No
players are worth what they go for, are they? No one's worth the sort of money that they're going for now, unless you're talking about Haaland or someone like that, and then they're worth every penny because you know what you're getting. But you're taking a risk. I mean, you're signing Mudryk, you're taking a massive risk. He could absolutely bomb, and there's no guarantee. He looks good, he's an exciting talent, but he could absolutely bomb. So you're taking a massive risk, and there's very few players that you're not taking risks on.
Yeah, and that's why it's wild, because the Gakpo thing, like you were saying, I mean, if you look at Gakpo, his goal scoring in the Eredivisie at least kind of warrants like a little bit of a transfer, but yet we saw him go for so low. Do you think that maybe that has to do with, again, Liverpool, we saw do a similar thing where they're front loading a lot of that cost? And maybe is that the way that maybe that's going to be the way that we can drop the value of these deals? Like, a lot of teams are expecting money up front very quickly. Again, I referenced the Enzo Fernandez deal.
Yeah, potentially, but I mean, I'm not aware of this sort of ins and outs of the Liverpool Gakpo deal. I still feel like that there must have been some sort of prearranged agreement with Gakpo at the start of the season or something to let him go at a certain price, because it just feels like they've got him on the cheap, Liverpool there, and PSV
very much so. Because if anybody, I mean, I've seen him play against a couple of Premier League teams, Leicester and of course Arsenal a couple of times, and he wasn't particularly dominant. But he was in the other league, in the Dutch league, and I think anyone who might have had reservations about his ability to step up saw him in the World Cup do exactly that. So that would have pushed me over the edge, and I thought that was the impetus for a bidding war that would make him unreasonably priced for a team like Arsenal, where I thought a 40 million pound player just became a 70 million pound player, and then he goes for just about 40. It's maddening. But before we get to user questions, just in general, what, and I hate asking this type of question, but I mean, what do you think the player total will be in January? Do you think we're signing 0, 1, 2? I mean, we haven't even talked about some rumors that are coming up on Declan Rice and midfield replacement.
They're definitely not signing Declan Rice in January.
I assume that was going to be the outcome. So Andy Rhodes, your dreams are over. But I mean, do you think we're going to do some business? And what do you think?
They're going to try. They're certainly going to try. I mean, whether you can get it over the line, it's impossible to say, because it all depends if they can get him over the line or not. But they're going to try, and but they are.
You think the club knows what the reaction is going to be if they don't sign anybody? And again, I fully agree with you about the don't just bring in warm bodies for the sake of bringing in warm bodies thing. But if they end January the way
they'll be aware, of course they will. But I don't think that will pressure them more to actually get it done. I don't think if you're a business that operates with no sort of money, you can just go and get it done because of the reaction that not getting it done would do, if you see what I mean. So they'll be well aware, and they will try. I still think maybe 2 players. I wouldn't be surprised still if, I hate just saying this because it's just going to end up getting clipped up by the aggregators and put out all across Twitter. Charles Watts says it. No, I wouldn't be surprised.
I'm putting the editing software on right now. So
yeah, I bet you are. I wouldn't be surprised if they.
I would not do that to you.
If they look at potentially a midfielder as well as, because I still think if you're looking at this squad over the second half of the season and you're putting a big red flag over someone who's going to potentially get injured that could disrupt everything, it's Thomas Partey. I mean, Arsenal lose Thomas Partey to an injury for 2 months, which we've seen happen time and time again since he's arrived at the club. Then, I mean, he's so important to how this team plays. And I think ANY's a good player. He's a good professional, blah, 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 like everyone says about ANY, but he's not Thomas Partey. He's not close to Thomas Partey. And I think I think it. So I would, I'd be very surprised if Arsenal aren't potentially looking at doing something for a midfielder if they can. So I think if you're going to say number, I in my mind I've got two, but it might be one, it might be none. We just got to wait and see how it all plays out.
And if you're just listening to this podcast, you've missed an incredible visual only breaking news tip that's come out of this. So you're going to have to go and subscribe on YouTube to watch it to find out. But
so speaking of midfielders, though, the Declan Rice situation, and I know I don't like to put a lot of credit on that because he's the one player where I think that if West Ham let him go in the middle of the season, their fans will riot. They will literally burn down the stadium. But there is a lot of smoke being said. We were talking about transfer fees going up. Well, there's a lot of reports saying that he'd actually, instead of the 100 million valuation that they're looking at, closer to a 75 million valuation. Is this something that you're hearing on the ground? Is there actually any smoke here? Like, is something happening, or are we just in la la land?
I don't even see I haven't even seen the report. I've seen mention, rumor and speculation, but I've not seen any actual definitive report saying that Arsenal are interested in Declan Rice from anywhere of substance. It's just
exactly
West Ham are in a relegation battle. They're not going to get rid of their captain and their best player in January. They'd be bonkers. I fully expect he'll go in the summer, Declan Rice, and I'd love Arsenal to be interested. No, I have not heard at all from anyone. I've never had Declan Rice mentioned at all. It just doesn't. I'm convinced he'll go to Chelsea. I'm convinced he'll go to Chelsea, and that's just a hunch. That's not based on any actual info I've had. But I've just thought for ages he'll end up at Chelsea when he does make the move, and that'll be in the summer. It's not going to happen this month. I mean, West Ham could not. Can you imagine if you get rid of Declan Rice in January? It's just not going to happen unless someone, maybe Todd Bowley, throws 150 million at him or something this in January. I can't see it. It's not going to be Arsenal. I look forward to it actually happening now and this clip being plastered across everything forevermore. But
we're going to save that for the Charles Watts v. the Gerbil special that we're planning on doing at the end of the transfer window. So. Okay, so let's get into some user questions. First, just a transitionary sad wave goodbye to one of the all-time greats on the Arsenal women's side. Unai Emery's done it again. Emi Martinez has done it again. They've stolen Jordan Nobbs. But I saw that you tweeted something about it earlier today, and was this a surprise in the timing and how it happened, or was this in the works for a while?
I mean, it was a surprise. It was a surprise, definitely, just because you think of Jordan Nobbs, you think of Arsenal, don't you? But she wants game time. She needs game time, and I think it's becoming pretty apparent that regular game time, if she wants to stay in and around the international picture, then she needs to play, and should get some game time still at Arsenal, but. They're kind of moving in a bit of a different direction now, aren't they? So in one way, it's a surprise just because she's been there for so long. She's been such an influential figure in the club, and then suddenly she's gone. But from a sort of purely professional point of view, it's not a surprise, really, is it? Because everyone wants to play, and everyone wants to be a regular starter, and everyone wants to make themselves as available as possible for their country. And so it makes perfect sense that she's moved on to where she'd have got a lot more guarantee of minutes.
It's an occupational hazard of being on a top team is you won't always get to play, and so I guess it's not surprising that happened. So, user questions. Our first one is from my good friend Hente from Finland, and he's putting you to the fire a little bit on this one. I'm just going to read the question out. As a respected representative of the game as a journalist, why is it that you and your colleagues do not try and seek more responsibility from those at Stockley Park? Fed up reading only criticism of VAR instead of trying to get the people responsible answering to it. We need to understand better. Please make them answer. Any thoughts to that? I mean, it's not personal with him and you, I guess, but it's I suppose a lot of people
they don't answer. They don't talk publicly. It's just the stance, isn't it? You'll get Howard Webb, for example, who's now running things. Will every so often will put his head up and do some sort of interview, but then you can't. There's no direct lines to him where they'll just publicly talk. It just doesn't happen.
Is there an attempt? I mean, are there regular kind of come on already? Let's people want to know what happened. I mean, are they? I mean, they do willfully. It sounds like just indignant and stubborn and stuck behind their walls, as everyone envisions them being, as far as just not wanting to explain what's going on.
Pretty much. I mean, they do send through an explanation at times, not to us in the written press, but to the broadcasters, of potentially why something hasn't been given, especially if it's a real controversial one. But it's nothing new. Referees just don't talk, do they? And VAR's the same. They might not be the referees on the field, but they still got to go by the same sort of rules. So it's frustrating, I know, and it feels like everything's inconsistent, but I mean, they're just not going to come out to the media and talk. It's just not going to happen.
Can I ask you a question on that? Because I think this is kind of what they're hinting at. Could you guys publicly make a statement, for example, saying we reached out for information about asked XYZ questions, and just continuously make it public to the fact that they're not reaching out? Or, and this is what I would say, would that sort of action actually blacklist reporters, and maybe it won't be something public, like a public backlash against a move like that, but maybe privately they'll tell teams maybe not to speak to reporters that are or publications that are going after referees in that way? Or does that not exist?
Step in and start affecting the relationship between media sources and access.
I highly doubt it. I couldn't imagine that would happen. I mean, certainly not clubs. Clubs are as annoyed as fans are with the referees, and so it's not going to affect any sort of access with clubs. And it wouldn't with the Premier League either. It's just not something that's always a bit of a myth when it comes to the media. And if you criticise, you get blacklisted, and it just never happens. It's just, I've never known it happen unless someone's got something completely wrong, with no substance behind the report whatsoever. If it just doesn't happen. It's a bit of a myth. That it's like, I get it all the time. It's like, you won't criticize a club because they'd not let you in, or something like that. They remove your tea and biscuits.
Yeah, no, I've seen you get that before, and it's so unwarranted.
What you're talking about? It's just utter. It's like I remember the end of Emery, and I used to destroy Emery, and not still try and be professional. I'd still try and be professional about it, but it was just, and you never get any sort of fall. I've never had any sort of fallback from the club from it, and I don't know anyone else. As long as you're professional and you keep, it's criticism that is kind of justified and backed up, then it's fine. I mean, if you go out and end up making up stuff about things, then maybe. Sorry,
Charles, I
just missed a 1-on-1 in the last minute.
I've just got a message from Unai Emery for you. He's still angry.
Just those last few months, I just seeing his face still just brings it all back. And it's not a slight against Unai, because Unai was really nice. He was a lovely guy.
Oh, he was very nice,
and he was really good to us as journalists. And I don't want to. There's nothing about his personality, his character, or anything like that. But it was just. It was such a bad fit at Arsenal. And by the end of it, it was just awful there. And those were dark times. You kind of fast forward, you think where they are now to what it was like in those last few months, and it's just, the difference is unbelievable. It really
to
is.
The refs though, because I'm not quite sure we got. I mean, can there be a we asked Stockley Park for comment and they declined comment, and because an accumulation of that, to me, does start to turn the heat up a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong. But
I don't think it would, because I just think it's a given that they don't really comment. It's just referees. It's like you don't see referees wheeled out in front of the cameras after games to explain their decisions, don't they? It's just it doesn't happen. That's just always been the way. So I'm not sure it would change their opinions too much.
You just need to get one of those huge, like, parabolic listening devices and just hold it up, and then you can report on it. So
it'd be great.
I really want to get
it would be great if they did actually, if we could hear what they're talking about. Yeah, that would just solve so many things. Although everyone will still be annoyed because they still come to the same decisions. You just hear them explaining it wrong, how they've got to those decisions. But
actually, One strange question I actually would always want to ask you guys to see if you would ever put it to the FA. There was a report recently that came out that noted that there are actually no black referees above a certain level, and they actually found out that the amount of diversity in the with the referees is incredibly non-existent. Matter of fact, I think it's in the in the top 2 levels there's only white males that are referees. Is that a question? Because we always talk about maybe that there's a bias that builds up in the referees because they're so alike. So these biases are the things that we're seeing play out on the field. Is that a question that any journalist would be willing to ask the FA? Like, what are you guys doing as far as diversity is concerned, and maybe trying to get different opinions inside of the referees?
I'm sure it is. I'm sure that's a question that's been asked many times by a lot of the more sort of broad journalists rather than me as a club specific Arsenal journalist. But it is something that needs to be fixed. It's so obvious and apparent as well that there needs to be far more diversity in referees, and not just referees, football as a whole. I'm sure, and I'm positive that is something that's been put to them many a times, but I'm not sure what the responses has been on that.
All right, perfect. Thanks. A non-transfer related question from Gooners from Bill. Question for Charles: do you consider Arsenal title favorites? If not, what would need to happen to change your mind? Pick one of those two. Well,
what would need to happen?
No matter what, you're going to get clipped. So
Arsenal, to change my mind, for me to consider Arsenal title favourites, Arsenal would have to be 20 points clear with about 5 games remaining. It's been totally mathematically impossible for Manchester City to catch them. Then I would dare to say that Arsenal are title favourites. But I won't even do a score prediction before a game. I'm so superstitious. So there is absolutely no way you are ever going to hear me say that Arsenal are title favourites at this stage. We're not even halfway through the season. Man City have just won away at Chelsea, and for me, Manchester
literally
City
just said it though. I mean, you just said Arsenal are title favorites. The context, as you know, context doesn't matter sometimes.
Do you think Arsenal are title favourites?
I think they can win. I don't think that they're favorites.
I think they. I mean, exactly. They can definitely win it. They can definitely win it. But I'm still looking at the gap for to 5th place at the moment more than I'm looking at the gap to Manchester City. Put it that way.
I mean, I agree with both of you. I understand why people would put City as the favorites. The only thing that's changing my mind, though, is that when you look on the underlying statistics on the pitch, we are actually the best team. We are actually have the output of the best team in the league right now. The thing about that, though, is consistency over a longer span of time. Obviously, City have the players that can come in and maintain that output, and we act, as we were talking about it, as the subject of the show is, have a large drop off, so that we may not be able to maintain this level of consistency and output. But if our starting 11 is healthy till the end of the year, I actually put us as favorites.
They can absolutely win it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, Leicester won it, and this Arsenal team is better than that Leicester team. It's about continuing them. It's about continuing the momentum. It's about and it sounds crap, and it's such a cliche when managers say one game at a time, and Arteta does it all the time. It's like, my only focus is next Saturday, but it has to be. If that's just how Arsenal have got to play it. They've just got to carry on doing what they're doing. I mean, if they get to February 15th, Man City, the first Man City game at the Emirates. Before that, they've got Spurs, they've got Man United. Obviously, they've got some difficult games. If Arsenal get to that Man City game and they've still got a sort of 5, 6, 7 point lead, and then they win, they beat Man City, I think that would be the time when you'd really start to get excited and think, they've given themselves one hell of a shot. Yeah, the next 6 weeks are so big in terms of this. If you want to consider Arsenal as realistic, proper title contenders, but I still think, for me, and maybe it's just me and the way I think, but I still think I'm still looking at 5th more than Man City, and that's
it isn't creeping in your head at all.
Oh,
it isn't creeping in your head at all. Do you start to get the feeling?
Absolutely. Of course it does. It'd be impossible not to. But it's still, you've got to be realistic. You're going up against, to win the title, you're going to have to give out 100 points. That's how good you have to be to beat Manchester City to the title. And you think where Arsenal finished last season, you think of their points tallies from last year, that it just feels like a bridge too far, but you never know. And the momentum they've built up so far this season, and they look great. They've got something about them, this team. And I would have no I think that I wouldn't be worried about playing Manchester City now. Put it that way. I'd look forward to playing Manchester City now, and that says it all.
I'm looking forward to these next couple of games. I mean, we should be in every game that we've got. 2-word answer. Who is the best player you've ever watched live?
Dennis Bergkamp.
Thought that's where we're going to go. Okay, perfect. We've got a couple questions about contract extensions. Anything other than what's already been published? We've extended Saliba's a year. I didn't realize Saka needed to be extended a year. I thought his contract was really kind of always ending in 2024. But any updates on any of those three? Do you think that they get done before we start the next season?
Oh, well, I certainly hope so, but I've got no updates on it at the moment. They're still talking. Nothing's been agreed. Nothing's been signed. The club is still confident they can get it done. All of the players publicly saying they want to get it done. So you would hope that all of them end up in a successful conclusion. But as it stands, there's nothing to say it's happening imminently.
Speaking of contracts, what about Cedric Suarez? We were having a lot of noise around him possibly joining Fulham recently. We haven't heard as much noise since that initial kind of report. But it is being said that he might be getting shopped around a little, that there are a couple of clubs that might be interested. Do we have any updates or any information on that?
There are a few clubs interested in Fulham, definitely one of them. There's a couple of clubs in Spain that are interested in him. And Cedric nearly went in the summer. He decided to stay. I think he felt like he was going to get quite a few opportunities to play. That hasn't happened. I think he does want to go out and play. He's a good professional. If you're Cedric Suarez, though, now the situation at Arsenal is, do you think to yourself, I could win the title here. I could get a title winner's medal if I stick around for six more months and then leave in the summer. It might not be that easy a decision to move. Yes, you want to play, but do you leave a team 5 points clear of the top of the Premier League halfway through the season? It's a big decision to make for me, but. They're definitely interested in him. I expect clubs will make offers for Cedric over the next couple of weeks, and then he and Arsenal will have a big decision to make.
We call that pulling an Alex song, by the way.
What, leaving in the middle?
Yeah. Him getting a Champions League medal with Barcelona and not playing.
Well, and thinking that Pujols is getting ready to hand him the trophy instead of Abidal. That's the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I still can't watch that. I can't watch it.
I think we've even Charles. I think we've even talked about that before. That like both of us like gets shivers and can't even stand to watch that. The last question before we go. Second to last. Who was playing against Oxford? My answer to this is Arsenal, but I guess the question is with 6 days before the between games with Newcastle and Oxford, and then another 6 or 7, maybe 5 or 6 between Oxford and Spurs. Do we see a strong side, or are we going to finally see the return of ESR? Are we going to see Vieira? What do you kind of think the tone of the lineup's going to be?
It'll be a Europa League type side. So those players you mentioned there, I think that ESR would be surprised if he doesn't play. I'm not sure he'll start, but I think we'll probably see him at least get half an hour under his belt, providing there hasn't been any sort of setback this week in training. But then it'll be your Vieira's. Holding will play. El-Neni, Lukonga, those sort of players will come in. There'll be a couple because more out of necessity than anything else. Probably Gabriel will play at centre back alongside Holding, just to have that left-sided centre back. I think Eddie will have to play just because there's no one else to play as a central striker. So I think he'll probably play. But other than that, then you're going to have Tierney left back. You'll have Tomiyasu right back, Holding and Gabriel, El-Neni, Lukonga, those sort of players. Maybe Granit will play. Because he tends to play, and so it'll be very much a Europa League team.
15 players then is what you're here to say today. Then
it'll be a Europa League team.
Well, when you say that, it's interesting that you brought up the thing about Eddie, because aren't we in that same situation with Martinelli and Saka too? Like, do we have anyone else to play there? I mean, obviously we can shift Vieira out wide, but he'd be coming in for Odegaard.
We have the Brazilian, the
Marquinhos.
You've got Marquinhos, and I think Vieira probably would play out wide in this one. I think you'd probably have El-Neni as the holding midfielder, and then maybe Granit and Sambi as the 2 number 8s in the 4-3-3, and then Marquinhos, Vieira, and Eddie up front.
Well, that'll be a 0-0 and a replay at the Emirates in a couple of weeks, which is great because I'll be around. All right, so we're going to finish off now. We've hit the 10 o'clock hour. We are doing another show after this. It's not in here, though, you've got to actually go out and rejoin. It's the third annual FA Cup of Football Phrases. Charles, you know that I love these English football phrases that you never hear Americans saying. That's what the bell's about: sixes and sevens, diabolical, all that. And we're having a tournament this year of 90 teams, and tonight is the preliminary rounds, like the rounds before the first round proper, where we're gonna get 26 out of 52 phrases into the field of 64, where next Tuesday will be judged as to the winners of those 64 by none other than Peter Drury, Lee Dixon, Sophie Nicolau, along with Jared and myself. And if anyone knows football phrases, it's them. But what is your favorite football phrase? Anything, just something that's so English and you would never hear an American talk about it in sports.
I like how you cut me out of that.
You can't put me on the spot like this. My head's just gone. It's like I'm sitting back in a GCSE exam.
Does this pod flatter to deceive?
Flatter to deceive. Yeah, there's one.
Are we ripping up trees? What are we doing here?
6 of one, half a dozen of the other. You know,
6s and 7s. Yeah, that's one. Throw it in the mixer.
My favorite. I think the second annual tournament winner was Pony. Like that game was Pony, and this podcast is Pony. So except for the Charles Watts portion.
It's one of my favorite Tottenham eras was when they were sponsored by Pony, and they just ran around with Pony on their shirt. It's just glorious.
It's fantastic. So if you're in the chat, please just exit out and then look for the new show and join us in there, or this might actually take you there when we end. Charles, where can we find you other than at goal.com? I know you've got YouTube, you've got your Twitter and Instagram.
Twitter and Facebook. Instagram, not quite so much. I try, but not so much. But yeah, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, where I try and
do you do the TikTok? Daily. Do you do the TikTok?
No, I'm fine.
Are there videos out there with this thing and doing dances?
Absolutely.
We'll film some of those at the Collington in a couple of weeks.
Yeah. The title parade in May. There you go. You can film all there.
Charles, on your way out, I just want to say once again, thank you so much for not only being on the show, but the actual information that you provide for Arsenal. I've been a huge fan for so long. I watch your YouTube like every single morning when you put it out for me, because I'm in the States, so it's always in the morning. So I just want to say, honestly, man, keep doing what you're doing. It is so impressive, and you've got so much love from the Arsenal fan base.
Nice one. Thanks, Aston. Good to meet you properly today for the first
Charles,
time.
why is this guy that I know really well for the last few years not complimenting me like this guy? I mean, but no, thank you. I look forward to to catching some WWE. We'll talk about that.
It's coming to London. Money.
I know. I saw that. So it's in the summer, but I'm gonna have a place to stay. So we'll see. We'll see what we can do there. But thanks for joining us, Charles. Appreciate it. And this has been the Arsenal podcast, and it wouldn't be a podcast with Charles if I don't end it off this way.
Once upon a time, way back when there were only 9,000